Hi everyone, welcome to another video from AQA GCSE History. We're continuing our focus on conflict and tension between East and West from 1945 to 1972, which is part of the Cold War. And again, this is Paper 1, Section B for AQA, and this is the depth study. If any of you are doing EdXL, this would be the period study and would be some different dates. So this video focuses on the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe. And now again, this is from part 1 of 3 for the AQA course, the Origins of the Cold War section. And this is video 3. So what was the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe? The Stalinisation of Eastern Europe was basically the Soviet expansion into Eastern Europe. It was a process where Stalin developed Eastern Europe from a sphere of influence into a system of satellite states. Now, satellite states were countries that were directly controlled by a bigger country, and I'll write down a definition of this on a later slide. He was imposing communist governments and controlled these countries and governments with his Red Army, which, remember, had been in the countries due to liberation from Nazi rule. It had gone in to help the countries and actually now were helping to control them due to Stalin's power. He was not allowing free and fair elections as promised at Yalta. And therefore, as opposed to being influential in Eastern Europe, as he was accepted to do at Yalta, and having friendly states to the USSR, he was creating states that are now controlled by the USSR and had no say whether they could be part of it or whether they could not be controlled. They were controlled without any question. So some key definitions for this part of the course. Satellite state is a state directly controlled by a bigger, more influential country, but the smaller state is formally independent in the eyes of the world. Sphere of influence, a state or nation has significant influence in smaller nations, as an area of nations. And buffer zone, a geographical area that would slow down invasion whenever countries had a friendly to the country being invaded. So here think Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. So why did the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe happen? Now the first answer is to consolidate the buffer zone. To ensure this was secure, because remember the buffer zone was designed to protect the Soviet Union from invasion from, for example, Germany, or by this point, other countries in the West that were becoming more influential and could pose a threat. So Stalin had to develop the sphere of influence he'd been accepted to have at Yalta into a series of satellite states to ensure that the buffer zone, which is this bit circled, was secure from the West. And a revision bullet point, I'll summarise this down for you, is the buffer zone needs to be strong for security against any possible invasion. So why else did the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe happen? Another answer can be expansion of control. So Stalin consolidated the buffer zone in order to give him more power. Therefore, perhaps the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe was more expansion here rather than security, which we saw in the previous slide, which it said that Stalin wanted to consolidate the buffer zone to protect him. Perhaps it can be a bit of both. In the exam, you might be asked about this. You might want to weigh it up, which you think is more accurate, more relevant. We can definitely see here, either way, Stalin aggressively expanding into Eastern Europe, either for control or for security, but there's no doubt it's an expansion nonetheless. So revision point, perhaps for expansion of control, could be Stalin wanted to control more land, which would equal more power for him. Because this BBC Bart's picture here of the Red Army going into Eastern Europe and liberating it from Nazi rule, but see the little soldiers are still there, they're not leaving. So it shows that he was going in there and he wasn't going to leave. So therefore you can look at two answers to this question. 1, security, through consolidation of the buffer zone, or 2, aggressive expansion, through expansion of control. And therefore it's up to you really to decide which one you think is the most accurate and why. They're both accurate, they're both relevant, they're both correct, but in the exam you might want to offer one as more or one as less. There's opportunity for discussion with this question, definitely. So what were Stalin's tactics for conquest? First of all, the Red Army. Remember, they were in Eastern Europe after World War II, having liberated it from Nazi rule. Therefore, they made rigging elections, controlling thought, and removing opposition much easier. The other one is salami tactics. Now, this is a little bit more complicated. I'm going to try and hopefully explain it in a nice, straightforward way for you all to revise. So, Stalin sliced away opposition. So, for example, they started off with coalitions between communists and non-communists. This then transformed into a removal of opposition. They got rid of other parties. Then they rigged elections in order to get the result they most wanted. So if you think about it, Stalin was slicing away opposition Eastern European countries like in cutting up a bit of salami until it is all gone and there's none left. If you look at the picture, the person cutting it could be Stalin, and the salami he's slicing is called the opposition. And you can see it's being slowly sliced in order to remove it and it to completely vanish. So he was slicing it up in order to make it completely vanish, which is why in the end communists always came away in favour and won, because the opposition was slowly sliced away. Communism was never directly imposed upon Eastern Europe, it was a gradual process. It's important to remember when you write about this. Stalin didn't just make the countries communist, it was a slow, gradual process that took time, and eventually, after all the opposition was removed, and then rigged elections happened, Stalin had his victory, and enabled the country to become communist. So what were Stalin's tactics for control? So when he had his control, how did he maintain it? Now firstly, in 1947 he set up Cominform, and this was to control Eastern Europe's communism. The leaders had to report to Stalin and take orders from him. So this really shows the satellite states coming into full force. They were directly controlled by Stalin, and they had to take orders from him. If their leaders didn't comply and didn't listen to him, they were removed and someone more suitable was put in place. Comecon in 1949 was also introduced, which made an economic system like the USSR. They were no longer allowed to trade with the West. There's a bit more to these, we'll look at these in another video, but this is how he controlled, and both sort of came about in response to the Truman Doctrine, which influenced Cominform, and Comecon was sort of a similar version of Marshall Plan, which we'll look at again in a later video. So we're going to look now at how the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe happened in specific Eastern European countries. So to start off with Poland, at Yalta they agreed on the formation of a provisional pro-communist coalition government. Now remember, a coalition government is when there's two parties in the same government. At Yalta, to appease the West, who wanted a non-communist government, because remember, the West had gone, or Britain in particular, had gone to war over Poland. They didn't want Poland to become another victim of another dictatorship. However, Stalin wanted to control Poland, so to appease both sides, they agreed on a provisional pro-communist coalition government. So it was originally intended to be provisional, so not temporary. It was pro-communist to appease Stalin, but a coalition government which would appease the West. So this allowed communists and non-communists in the government. There was an election in 1947, which was multi-party, but it was rigged, so the communists would win. The previous coalition was now over, and the communists were now in total control. Now Poland is a really good example of salami tactics, because you've got coalition government, a rigged election, leading to the result they wanted, and then the communists being in total control. So you can see again, slicing away bit by bit at the opposition. Poland is also a really good example because it's one of the first countries that Stalin tests his new ideas of conquest on. So this is a really good one to learn and know a little bit about. How did the Soviets expand into Albania? So the communists came to power in 1945 after the Second World War, and they had the aid of Yugoslavia. This is quite a straightforward one, and there's not really much to this country regarding communist takeover. How did the Soviets expand into Hungary? In 1945, there was free elections, and this was hoped for a communist victory, but the non-communists won. Communists took over the secret police, repressed popular smallholder parties, and forced its leaders to flee. In 1947, there were elections. Communists won the election, but did not have a majority, despite them being rigged. So this was quite a problem for them. But they were in total control by 1948, as they had removed their opposition. So again, salami tactics. Again, slowly taking over power, repressing other powers, removing opposition, rigged elections. This is another really good case study to look at, some really key ones to remember. If you can't remember all of them, remember some really specific details about some of them, and that will definitely help you in the exam, even if you can't remember them all. So how did the Soviets expand into Bulgaria? They wanted rigged elections, removal of opposition, and they forced mergers with other parties. How did the Soviets expand into Czechoslovakia? So in 1946, a coalition government was formed with the communists being involved. By 1948, in February, the communists had forced the other coalition parties out of the government. President Beneš gave in and supported a communist-dominated government. Rigged elections were then held in May to validate the communist victory, and then the president resigned. So as you can see again, the salami tactics take place. You've got coalition government, Communists enforce the other coalition parties out of government. The president gives in and supports a communist-dominated government. Rigged elections, validates a communist victory. The president then resigns. So again, slice by slice, bit by bit, the communists are taking power in Czechoslovakia. And this is the last country in Eastern Europe to fall to communism. And it does spark a lot of aggressive reaction from the West. They're quite angry about this. And it leads to some of the other events, such as the Berlin blockade, becoming quite a centre of attention. Because this is quite an aggressive form of takeover. It went from very little communist power to a lot of communist power. So this is a really good one to revise, really good one to remember, learn the specific details, and then you might want to do some extra reading around this as well. BBC Bytes says all this has got some really good resources as well, so you might want to go and check that out as well, see what happened there. So what happened in Yugoslavia and why was it different? So the Yugoslavians were a very different scenario because they liberated themselves from Nazi rule by the communist movement led by Tito, who is this person here. Therefore, the Soviets were unable to turn Yugoslavia into a proper satellite state, as they had none of their army there. They hadn't been able to get them to liberate it because they'd done it themselves. Tito therefore did communism in his own way and rarely listened to Stalin. He was expelled from Commonform, which we saw earlier, in 1948. So Yugoslavia was a very different scenario. As we said, it helped Albania as well. So it was a communist state. It was supportive of the communist cause, but it was very opposed to Stalin. It's very different, and Tito was not a member of Commonform after 1948. So when you write about Yugoslavia, you must remember that this was not taken over in the usual way. It was not an example of Soviets and army tactics. It was completely liberated by itself. It was very different, very unique. And make sure you write about that specifically in the exam if a question on Yugoslavia comes up. So what were the consequences of the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe? Now, consequences can be both positive and negative, but we're going to look largely at the negative consequences, which in other words mean how did it make tension rise? So first of all, as we can see from the picture at the top, it increased tension dramatically between East and West. Stalin was, in their eyes, aggressively conquering Eastern Europe. It went against everything they agreed at Yalta, everything they agreed at Potsdam. It was way beyond the sphere of influence. This was a satellite state dictatorship, which was not what the West had wanted or agreed to. It led to the Truman Doctrine in 1947 and the Marshall Plan, also in 1947, and also led to the Iron Curtain speech by Churchill in 1946 and the Long Telegram in 1946. And all these four documents here are from a Western point of view and do argue largely Soviet expansion was aggressive, it was negative, it needed to be stopped, it was an Iron Curtain speech, it was a very aggressive, evil empire, and therefore this sets the sort of tone for East-West negative relations for the remainder of the Cold War. This aggressive expansion was largely to blame for the heightened tensions. Therefore, perhaps you could say this rather than Yalta-Potsdam was the start of the Cold War. If we hadn't seen this, the Yalta-Potsdam would have just been conferences of disagreements. But this really firmly divides East and West. There's now an Eastern Bloc made up of Soviet satellite states and a Western Bloc made up of states friendly, but not satellite states for the West, states that were friendly towards the Americans, and therefore this is a clear division between East and West in Europe. So you might want to make a revision timeline in your own time. I've started for you Yalta, atomic bomb, tested over Potsdam, and then Potsdam. If you want to do this, you can add in the dates when the countries became communist in Eastern Europe and why. This will really help to map out when events happened, why maybe events happened as they did, and therefore when you write about them in the exam, you can talk about them really clearly knowing which country went to communism first. You can probably use the internet, revision guides, video bite-sized activity. So we're going to look at some exam practice now. This is again the question from the AQA Specimen paper 2, the 16-mark question at the end. And it says the main reason for the development of the Cold War in the years 1945 to 1949 was the Truman Doctrine. How far would you agree with this statement? Explain your answer. So again, points against the statement for the video. From the few videos we've looked at so far, we've got a lot of information against the development. We've looked at the atomic bomb, the conferences, relationships between the big three, and now the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe. In the exam, you're only going to have maximum 16-17 minutes to write this question out fully. So therefore, I would suggest only talking about a couple of specific examples. Don't try to talk about everything. You won't get enough time. But definitely I've given you a lot to think about with this question, a lot to sort of take away and formulate a good response, making some good specific examples. But thinking about the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe, you could say Stalin was taking control, it went against the Yalta agreements, it caused a reaction from the West, such as the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. So therefore, perhaps rather than the Truman Doctrine itself, with the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe, we could argue that itself, the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe itself, caused the Truman Doctrine. Therefore, the development of the Cold War was, rather than the Truman Doctrine, was actually the Stalinisation of Eastern Europe, because that caused most tensions to rise. It led to the Truman Doctrine, and therefore an increase in Cold War tensions. So perhaps this is a really good point to say against the statement, looking at the Truman Doctrine for and also the Truman Doctrine against, how you can sort of argue the same sort of point. Common form, Stalin asserts his control over Eastern Europe, and remember this was a really clear indication that the Satellite States were under direct control of the Soviet Union, and it was a really clear dictatorship version. Now 1945 to 1949 are the dates signposted in the question. To get the best marks in this question, remember you must talk about the dates specifically, so learn them as best you can, which will make your answer secure and confident. So make sure as you're really writing and revising topics to do with the Cold War, learn the dates, the specific information will really help you to make a good, strong answer to this question. And remember to come to a conclusion at the end, what you think and why. Thanks for watching today's video, guys. I hope you found it useful. I'll be posting some more soon. Hopefully you find them useful as well. Come back and watch some more or recap the older ones. Thanks, bye.